Isolation. Isolation involves cutting off outside influences, so people only hear one viewpoint. By limiting contact with friends, family, or diverse media, the controlling group makes its version of reality seem like the only truth. This can happen physically by moving members to a secluded place, or mentally by discouraging or banning books, shows, and websites that challenge the group's perspective. Without different opinions to compare, individuals become more dependent on the manipulator for any sense of guidance or normalcy. Fear indoctrination. Fear indoctrination keeps people obedient by threatening dire consequences for disobedience, whether it's social ostracism or even supernatural harm. The group tells frightening tales of what happens to those who leave or step out of line. People are warned that if they try to exit, they'll lose their families, face eternal punishment, or suffer horrible fates. As a result, members feel afraid to question the group, convinced that staying is the only way to remain safe. Love bombing. Love bombing showers newcomers with praise, affection, and compliments to make them feel cherished. Right from the start, they're told they are special or chosen. This sudden, overwhelming warmth can be disarming. People let down their guard because they crave acceptance. Over time, that affection becomes conditional. If you doubt the group's teachings, the love disappears. The initial kindness, however, is powerful enough to keep many people loyal and eager to win back the group's approval if they ever displease it. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer keeps people from uniting against the manipulator. By creating cliques, spreading gossip, and encouraging suspicion, the group fosters an environment where members don't trust each other enough to share concerns. Constantly looking over their shoulders, people focus more on internal rivalries than on questioning the larger system. This fragmentation makes it much easier for a leader or organization to control everyone, since no unified opposition can form. Groupthink. Groupthink happens when maintaining harmony becomes more important than considering other ideas. Members avoid anything that might rock the boat, so they stop bringing up doubts or evidence that conflicts with the group's stance. Anyone who questions the consensus is shunned or ridiculed, creating more pressure to agree. Over time, the entire group accepts decisions that seem logical within their bubble but look extreme to outsiders. Critical thinking erodes as everyone just goes along with the group's collective view. Repetition. Repetition is a simple but effective way to make beliefs stick. The same slogans, doctrines, or ideas are repeated until they feel familiar and, therefore, true. When people hear something countless times, especially without hearing opposing viewpoints, they tend to accept it. This effect is stronger if other sources of information are cut off. After a while, most stop questioning whether the repeated statements make sense and simply internalize them as fact. Peer pressure. Peer pressure uses people's natural desire to be accepted. When everyone else seems convinced of a belief, it's hard to be the lone voice of disagreement. Group members might hold public meetings where each person must declare support. Anyone hesitating risks social exclusion or open hostility. This tactic leads individuals to doubt their own reasoning because the crowd appears unanimous. Many ultimately give in just to avoid conflict and remain part of the group. Guilt and shame. Guilt and shame involve blaming individuals for any failure to accept or follow the group's ideals. They might be told, "It's your fault you feel uncertain," or "You're bringing negativity upon yourself." In a highly moral or religious context, the group might say doubting the leader is a sin. Over time, people begin to see themselves as flawed whenever they have independent thoughts. They crave the group's approval as a way to relieve their guilt, making them even more dependent on its acceptance. Information control. Information control occurs when an authority figure or organization decides what members can read, watch, or learn. Ideas that contradict the group's teachings are labeled as dangerous or evil. Members may be encouraged to avoid news, books, or even family conversations that could raise doubts. By controlling the flow of information, the group keeps people ignorant of alternatives, reinforcing loyalty. Any outside idea is quickly dismissed as propaganda or lies. Black and white thinking. Black and white thinking divides everything into extremes. The group is entirely right, outsiders are entirely wrong. There's no middle ground or room for nuance. This mindset discourages people from exploring alternative viewpoints because any deviation is seen as betrayal. If you raise a subtle point or express uncertainty, you're told you're siding with evil. Over time, this polarizing perspective narrows a person's ability to reason about complex issues, making them more susceptible to the group's absolute claims. Us versus them. Us versus them goes hand in hand with black and white thinking. The group frames itself as enlightened, moral, or chosen, while everyone else is misguided, dangerous, or malicious. This creates a siege mentality, making members think they must stick together to survive. They grow suspicious of outsiders, ignoring any idea that doesn't come from within. The group can then claim any criticism as an attack by hostile forces, reinforcing the belief that only the group is trustworthy. Charismatic leader. A charismatic leader is often the focal point of mind control. This person seems exceptionally confident, wise, or even divinely inspired. They become the group's source of truth, demanding absolute trust. Followers regard criticism of the leader as unthinkable because that might mean questioning the foundation of their entire belief system. The leader's charm and authority overshadow any contradictions, enabling them to wield massive influence over people's minds and lives. Public confessions. Public confessions force members to admit to mistakes, doubts, or personal failings in front of everyone. While framed as a path to honesty, this practice often serves to humiliate and control. Once someone publicly airs their flaws, they rely on the group for acceptance and forgiveness. This dynamic strengthens the group's power as individuals become more fearful of being judged again. Confession sessions also make an example of dissenters, discouraging others from voicing concerns. Induced dependency. Induced dependency means making individuals rely on the group for their basic needs: food, housing, or emotional support. They might be told to quit their jobs or donate all their savings so they have nowhere else to turn. When a person depends entirely on the group for survival or validation, it becomes risky to leave. The manipulator becomes not only a spiritual or ideological guide, but also the source of life's necessities. Escalating commitment. Escalating commitment leads people to invest more time, energy, or money into the group step by step. Perhaps it starts with a small donation or a weekend retreat. Gradually, they're asked to make bigger sacrifices, quitting jobs, moving away, or cutting off family. Each decision makes leaving harder because members feel they've sunk too much to turn back. They tell themselves it must be worthwhile. Otherwise, they'd have to admit they wasted resources. Emotional roller coaster. An emotional roller coaster occurs when the group alternates between praise and harshness. One moment, the leader offers warmth and validation. The next, there's punishment or criticism. This keeps members in a constant state of anxiety. They scramble to please the leader to return to that fleeting sense of approval. This unpredictable climate also distracts people from bigger issues because they're too busy trying to stabilize their day-to-day emotional condition. Gradual desensitization. Gradual desensitization introduces small, unsettling ideas or practices so subtly that members don't realize how much they've adapted. Over time, the group pushes boundaries further, maybe starting with mild rules and moving on to extreme demands. Initially, people might feel uneasy, but they soon become used to each step. By the time the group asks for something truly alarming, members have normalized so many smaller steps that they barely notice. Confusion and overstimulation. Confusion and overstimulation flood people's senses with constant activity, conflicting information, or emotionally charged sessions. This overload makes it hard to think critically. People become too mentally drained to question the doctrine, so they cling to whatever the group says provides clarity. Exhausting rituals, endless meetings, or contradictory lessons all sap mental energy, leaving people more open to suggestions that promise relief or certainty. Victim blaming. Victim blaming shifts fault for abuse onto the target. If a member is mistreated, the group says it's because they didn't follow rules or lacked faith. By insisting the person caused their own suffering, the manipulator avoids accountability. The victim also tries harder to conform, thinking, if I just do better, I won't be punished. Over time, members internalize blame, believing any negative outcome is solely their own doing. Scripted infallibility. Scripted infallibility implies that the group's doctrine or leader cannot be wrong. If clear contradictions arise, members are told there's a deeper purpose they can't understand yet. Even obvious failures are twisted into lessons or tests of faith. This creates a loop where any challenge only reaffirms the group's correctness. People learn to ignore discrepancies because they're convinced everything must fit into a higher plan, even if it defies common sense.